Good afternoon, folks. Welcome back to the farm. It's a beautiful, bright, sunshiny day out here. The snow, she's a-melting. Such a nice day. We're going to do some work out in the shop, so stick around. So our project today involves a chicken coop, and it's one of the last things we've been meaning to do. You can see their automatic door opening here. Kelly wants to put like a little doghouse over that area with another entrance facing another direction. So when the wind blows, the wind doesn't go whipping through that door. Right now we have some of that plastic material there, kind of like they put on refrigerator or walk-in refrigerator doors to keep the cold in. But the chickens really don't like that plastic, and they don't like going through it. So we're going to build that little box today. So we've already purchased the 2x4s, the siding and everything. We've had it since summer. But it's finally time to get this done because the wind's going to start whipping up here in the late winter and going into spring. We're going to get a lot more wind. So what we're going to build is like a 2x2 little doghouse. So we'll start making the frame out of this 2x4. And then once we get the frame built, we'll start cutting our siding to go on the outside of the frame. And then we have some corrugated roofing over there that we can use for the top of it. So let's start cutting this up. And then once I get the pieces cut, I'll kind of show you what we're doing. Got our 2x4 cut into the lengths that we need to make a 24-inch frame, and that'll be more apparent the length and everything that we've cut later. And then we've got our rip fence set to 1.5 inch spacing here because we want to rip these down to 1.5 inches. And because these are 3.5 inches, we're going to have a little strip left over. And then we've lowered our blade to where it's just over the top of our 2x4. Because if for some reason we do nick a finger on here, we don't want to take our whole finger off. It would just maybe put a slice in it, which is better than losing a finger. So we're going to get all these run through here and make them 1.5 inches thick. Got our pieces ripped down on the table saw, and if you noticed before, we had two different lengths. Our outside ones are 24 inches is what we want to end up with, and because these are 1.5 inch wide, we had to cut the inside pieces 3 inches short to allow for these end pieces here on both ends. So now what we're going to do is we're going to come in here 3/4 of an inch on these pieces, and we're going to pre-drill a hole for a screw to go through here on all the corners of these long pieces. The reason we do that is we don't want to split the end of our board there, and it'll tighten up real nice because the screw won't be catching on this piece, but it'll only be catching on this piece. So it'll be run free through this piece, so it'll suck this up real tight. Otherwise, if the threads didn't line up correctly, if we didn't have this pulled together real tight, this joint may be loose if we did not do that. So we're using number 10 3-inch screws, and the good drill bit for that we found out will be a 13/64. So we'll chuck this up over here in our drill press so we have nice straight holes, because it'll keep it at 90 degrees. And we'll drill all these holes. The other thing we do is we want to drill across the grain right here instead of with it this way. It's even less likely to split if we go across that way on the grain. We're doing this on our welding table because our welding table we know has square sides. So we can kind of make sure we're square as we go together. It'll kind of square itself because the cuts are all square, but just helps to have a visual. And you can also see that we ran those screws in, and because we drilled that hole, we could run them down to where they're countersunk, and we're not splitting this wood. So we got one more of these to make, and then we can start putting this together. Got both of our frames made, and if they're not exactly square, it doesn't really matter, because when we cut our siding to go on the side of this, that square piece of siding will act as a square, and then all we got to do is square the frame up with the siding, and it'll be perfect. So we're going to cut 2 pieces of siding 2 foot by 2 foot, and then we'll get those screwed onto this with 1.5-inch screws. Got our siding on our sawhorses down here. Remember, when you're cutting siding with a circular saw, the circular saw cuts in an upward motion, unlike the table saw, which cuts in a downward motion. So you want to put your finished side down, so any tear out is up here on top on the back. So we've got our straight edge clamp on here that we run our saw along, and our saw has a 4-inch setback from the edge of here to the blade. So instead of measuring 24 inches, we measured 28 inches, which will give us a 24-inch piece. Now that we've got this piece cut off of the big board, our maximum cut width here on our table saw is 24 inches. So we're going to cut the other piece on this saw, and remembering about our tear out, we're going to put the good side up, and then this piece we're going to put to the outside out here, because once we're done we want this piece trimmed off. So our piece is 4 foot, and then plus this overlap right here. So we'll be cutting that off. Got two of our panels made, so now we have to go back over to the siding and cut another 2-foot piece off of that. So we'll get that done. Got our box all put together. It's 2 by 2 by 2. So now we've had to overlap this piece to come to the outside edge of the siding. So instead of 21 inches, this is going to be a little bit less than 20 inches, probably about 20 1/4, because these are 3/8 here. So we'll get 4 of these pieces cut for up here and on the bottom, and then the framework will be done. Okay, now we need to cut our holes, our access holes, and they're going to be 12 inches wide by 14 inches tall. They're going to be 1.5 inches up off the bottom, so we have a full 1.5 inches down here. And then we'll get it cut on 2 sides. So we'll cut it on this side and we'll cut it on this side. So that way the door will be facing the south. And if we ever want to flip it, all you got to do is turn the box and it'll face the north. But I think south facing is going to be our best bet. So let me mark these out and we'll get these cut. Got our holes cut. So the orientation that we're going to start with is south facing. So this side will go up against the chicken coop, and then this side will be their exit here, and then that will provide them some wind protection on that back side. So we've got the fire burning here in the shop to bring the temperature up. We can now get some paint on this thing, and then we can get the piece of roofing cut for the top. Now the roofing will just cut like a piece just a little bit bigger than the 2 by 2, and then the side that comes up we'll put against the barn. There's an eave up above that'll protect most of it, but if any moisture was to get on here, it would roll down and go into the slot. Now, as small as this is, we don't have to do any kind of roof pitch or anything on it, because the roofing's thick enough to where any any water that accumulates on the top will have plenty of depth to get off of the sides and not sit on top of it. So I'm going to go inside and get the paint, and we'll get the roof piece brought in. Those pieces that I pointed to earlier are not wide enough, but I got another piece outside we'll go get, and we'll get back on this thing. Got our piece of roofing retrieved from the barn. I think Kelly would want this anyway because this matches the roof on the chicken coop. So we've measured, and from this piece here, this corner, to this corner here, we'll cover our little box real well. And we're just doing this with tin snips. So we're just coming in here with our tin snips and cutting along. These are the left-hand cut tin snips. If you didn't know, there's left and right. You can see the right-handed ones up here. So depending on which side you need to cut on is to which side you'll use. So we'll get to cutting this. Now cutting this edge makes this edge like sharp as a razor. So we take one of our little sanding pads and we just come down the edge, knocking that sharp burr off. So if you do happen to brush up against it, you don't cut yourself. Now cutting the other direction, the tin snips do not work as well because of the ridges in the metal. So we're going to go ahead and use our 4.5-inch grinder with a cutoff wheel, and we'll get this buzzed off. We're going to end up with a piece around 26 by 26, somewhere in there. Gutter cut. So we're going to put the flush edge right up against the coop. Like I said, we have a 1.5-foot eave up on top that'll kind of cover any water from coming down on here. But if we do have an issue with moisture getting down here, we'll just run a bead of silicone along here if need be. But you can see what it looks like. Got a little overhang here in the front. And then we'll just fasten this down with the roofing screws, the kind that got the rubber washer. And then we have an 1.5-inch piece to attach to all the way around, so it'll be down pretty solid. So let's go get some paint on this thing. Well, we had to scrap the painting idea because the paint was out here and it got frozen. So we'll take it in the house and let it thaw out for a couple days. And then we'll get this thing painted, and then we'll install it. And down around the bottom, we're going to have a layer of those red bricks that we always use, that we got a lot of around the homestead here. Same ones Kelly used as the border around the chicken yard. But there'll be one layer of those around the bottom. They're 5 inches tall. So the bottom of this will be even with the siding on the bottom of the chicken coop. And then when we mount it, the chicken coop has studs on either side of the door on the inside. So wherever the center of those studs are, we'll drill a hole in this top plate here. And then we'll run a 3-inch screw all the way through to connect to those studs. We could even do it down on the bottom if we wanted to, but I don't know if we'll need to. This thing just needs to be fastened to it, basically. But that's what we'll do. We'll wait on putting the lid on until we do that, of course. And then next time I get down to Menards, they make a little foam piece that fits perfectly underneath that tin. And that would seal up these edges here, if we even want to worry about that. Probably don't need to. But that might keep the water from going over the edge and then running back in. So maybe we'll do it. So I hope you enjoyed this project as much as I did. I love getting out here in the shop when the weather starts warming up and it's not 30 below out here. With spring coming on in a few months, we'll be out here a lot, and of course we'll be out in the garden again too. So we hope you stick around with us here on Markelly Farm, where we strive to make the content always free. We don't do memberships, we don't do Patreon. We want you to be here and be able to maybe learn some skills that maybe you don't know how to do, and start doing stuff the old way, because that's the best way. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. Come back and see us on Markelly Farm.